In remarks last week, President Biden sounded anything but bullish on the economy, warning Americans that we could see setbacks and that even more time is needed to reduce inflation. And with grocery prices now up more than 12% over the 12 months ending in October, working American families are feeling the pinch this Thanksgiving. Is the worst behind us? Can a Republican Congress slow spending next year to rein in inflation? Joining me now to discuss this is U.S. Representative Warren Davidson. He serves on the House Financial Services Committee, the House Select Committee on the Economy, and he represents Ohio's 8th Congressional District. Congressman Davidson, good to see you today.
Always nice to talk with you, Joseph. Thank you.
Well, I want to give you a chance to respond to President Biden. The economy continues after the election to be a big story. Here's what he had to say over the weekend about inflation and the prospects of it getting better. Let's play clip 3.
But it's going to take time to get inflation back to normal levels as we keep our job market strong so we could see setbacks along the way. I don't doubt that, but thus far we're in good shape. But we're laser focused on that.
Congressman Davidson, is that a fair assessment?
No, he's not laser focused on it. I mean, clearly, we didn't get here accidentally. There were policy choices. This wasn't just some random occurrence that somehow inflation showed up. Joe Biden's offered the same things: restrictions on supply, and things that would stifle capital investment in lots of big spending plans. I guess the good news is, with Republicans coming into the House, there's some hope for a more measured look at spending. And I guess our hope is that, at least on the conservative end, that all of our colleagues join in that more measured look at spending. So we'll see. I guess that's the bright spot, is there's hope that some of these bad policies will be reversed.
Congressman Davidson, do you think it's inevitable that inflation is going to come down just over time as we continue to recover from the impacts of all of the money that the federal government pushed into the economy as supply chain issues get fixed? Or does Congress have to take action in order to see inflation fixed?
Well, the Federal Reserve has taken action, and they've raised rates pretty substantially. Historically, inflation doesn't get under control until the short-term cost of money, short-term interest rates, exceeds the rate of inflation. And those two are approaching one another, at least at this point, if you take the official number at face value. If you look at the supply constraints, there are more people working than there were. The unemployment rate's low, but there are still fewer people working today than there were prior to COVID. So there are lots of people still on the sidelines. And perhaps one of the big drivers, energy policy. Joe Biden hasn't reversed energy policy, though he did signal to Saudi Arabia, hey, we're not going to try to prosecute, MBS for, the Jamal Khashoggi incident, which is something that Joe Biden promised on the campaign trail. Nevertheless, Joe Biden administration in the same week is trying to prosecute former President Trump. So I guess he's going to give a pass to, the leader of Saudi Arabia, but he won't give a pass on anything to Donald Trump. And I don't think people want a pass out of America's justice system. They want, one standard. And so you'll continue to see politicization. That's what a lot of people fear the Biden administration is focused on. And meanwhile, they're not abandoning their bad policies. They're driving this for energy.
Well, Saudi Arabia did pull off one of the greatest upsets in World Cup history today when they beat England 2-1. So perhaps they will be in a better mood and we could get some more cooperation from them. Although, sadly, I doubt that's going to have much of an impact. Congressman Davidson, we are in a lame duck session. A lot of Americans kind of think that after an election and before the next Congress is sworn in, where everybody takes time off. But that's certainly not the case this year. There's a couple of really important issues being debated right now in Congress, one of which is the Respect for Marriage Act, the so-called Respect for Marriage Act, which would, of course, redefine marriage in federal statute. You've talked about this bill. What are your issues with that?
Well, the Senate did at least address one of the big concerns. I sent letters to our senators. I encouraged my colleagues to share a similar letter with theirs. At the House passed version made no recognition of marriage at all, of enforcement concerns that were in the House passed bill. The House passed bill, ostensibly is about gay marriage and interracial marriage, neither of which is actively being threatened by any state or federal legislature. but nevertheless, they wanted to move the bill. The real thing was in the House version, it gave enforceability to anyone who claimed discrimination on the basis of race or gender in their marriage. And in the Senate, this would have done what Hillary Clinton said in 2016. You'll just have to change your doctrine. So in the Senate, they did at least address that for nonprofits, churches, for example, or church properties, or faith-based nonprofits like the Family Research Council. You want people that are aligned in doctrine and in worldview as part of these kinds of organizations. But what the Senate passed, the Senate language that's up for debate today doesn't yet do is deal with individual freedom. And of course, the First Amendment deals with individual freedom, not just the ability of a church to have its own doctrine, but for you, not just to have your faith, but to exercise it freely. And that's what's protected in the Constitution. So I think ultimately that's where the court would land. But in the meantime, you're almost guaranteed to see more of these court cases like Masterpiece Cake, or photographers for weddings, venue hosts, saying that individuals have discriminated against them, and they'll use this text that's working its way through the Senate if we don't change it. So I think Mike Lee has a good, thoughtful amendment. It'd be great to see that adopted. And of course, the real answer is to let's just keep marriage the way that marriage was designed to be, one man and one woman.
That's exactly right. And there is still time to do that, though. 12 Republicans in the Senate did join with the Democrats to advance this legislation forward for debate. They would have to vote again. They'd have to get 60 senators again to vote to pass the bill on a cloture vote so that it could actually advance. If any three of those 12 decided after debating the issue that it is in fact not a good idea, that legislation would not pass. And so we are encouraging people, continuing to encourage people to contact our legislators. They should do so by going to frcaction.org or text the word marriage to 67742. Text the word marriage to 67742 to find out how you can take action right now. And speaking of continuing, there is a continuing resolution also being debated in Congress. Tell us what you're working on with that.
Well, a continuing resolution would be great if we got it into the next Congress, because you'd have a Republican majority in the House. It'd be more likely to be amended. But, the deadline for funding the federal government is October 1st. That's when the new fiscal year starts. If Democrats were proud of what's in this bill, they would have voted on it before the election. They're loading it up with all kinds of bad policy. And Republicans have the narrowest of hopes of stopping this bill. And one of the ways that we could stop it is the Defense Authorization Act has to be passed before they can get into appropriations. You have to get the authorizing language across the finish line. And look, the American people are already sending the signal by not joining in the military, by changing the focus there. They've really caused a lot of families to second guess. I mean, I had a girl in our district say no to an Air Force Academy appointment over kind of some of the kind of more woke ideology concerns, which is hard to see for our country. So if Republicans could hold together, we could stop the defense authorization from passing without some reform. And, that might take time. That might get us into the next year. But fundamentally, Democrats want a really big spending bill, lots of strings attached. And as I say, don't bankrupt America financially or morally. This bill certainly threatens to do both.
Congressman Davidson, looking beyond the lame duck session, the majority for the Republicans will be narrower than they had certainly hoped heading into next year, but it will be a majority nonetheless. What are you hoping this new Republican majority does when it convenes in January?
Well, first and foremost, I hope that we are on offense. So Democrats with a 4-seat majority, you would have thought they had 100 seats. And Republicans certainly didn't go very aggressively when Paul Ryan was Speaker. So it was great to be there. I kept getting questions like, how do you guys not have a plan for X? And then I would pull out this little booklet called A Better Way that was drafted before I got elected. I came in June of 16. And Paul Ryan was already Speaker, and I would show, well, here's the play right here. And they would say, well, why aren't you guys doing that? I'm like, well, that's something I'm still learning. And as you look now well into this time in Congress, I think Republicans are done with this. They want to see our party follow through, do what we said we would do in the campaign. And if that's a 2-seat majority, 3-seat majority, 5-seat majority, somewhere in that range, we're still going to have the gavels. We have to move forward and do the things we promised to do if we're ever going to earn the trust to grow our majority, take back the Senate, and flip the White House.
Now, we know over the last 2 years of Congress that these January 6 committees sucked up a lot of energy from Congress, and by most people's assessment, because they didn't even allow Republican members on the committee. This was in objectively a partisan effort, essentially a commercial for the Republicans to try to, or for the Democrats against former President Trump. And now there is the assumption, and there has been the suggestion by congressional Republicans that they're going to do their own set of investigations, including against President Biden, related to his son Hunter, and a variety of other investigations. How do you defend yourself against the allegation that, well, the Democrats were just abusing their power, now the Republicans are just abusing their power for political purposes?
Look, I think the frustration for the average American is they know that Justice Departments, Lady Justice is blindfolded in the statutes for a reason. Justice is supposed to be applied even-handedly, and they know that it hasn't been done that way. And look, CBS, 2 years after the fact, finally comes out and says, oh yeah, Hunter Biden's laptop's real. I mean, we could have told you that right away. They said, the supposedly brilliant people in the intelligence community said, oh no, it looks like Russian disinformation. You had a person, Tony Bobulinski, come forward and say, well, if it's Russian disinformation, how do I have a carbon copy of the same email? I was in the email chain. They got me too? No, I have had this laptop. This is something I was part of, and no one would even give him a follow-up interview, including Fox News after his Tucker Carlson interview. All the intelligence, it seems like a high school kid could have solved this case. And so we just want the Justice Department to function. And, you look at, like I said, there's a lot of concern about what's happening.
I know you have a lot more to say there, but we are out of time, so we're going to have to bring you back to continue this conversation. I know it will continue, so we will do that. But thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you.